We all know that creating can take a long time, but have you ever wondered if that was a way to drastically increase your building speed? Well, there are many things you can do to achieve that, and I'm going to show some of them to you, ranging all the way from basic keybinds that will just save you a couple seconds, to a crazy unknown 2.2 feature that can help you save hours by the end of your building process. And when I say secret, it's because by the time I found this keybind, which was December of last year, I found it entirely on accident, and I hadn't seen anyone that even mentioned it, and I still haven't. But we're going to start from the basics with simple key bindings that you might already know if you've been creating for a bit, but are extremely useful and underused. You can move objects with the WASD keys, and holding shift with those allows you to move them in smaller steps. You can rotate objects with Q and E, and using Alt Q allows you to flip them horizontally, while Alt E allows you to flip them vertically. You can deselect objects with Alt D and delete them with the delete key. You can use Ctrl C to copy and Ctrl V to paste, and Ctrl D to duplicate objects. Holding shift and then dragging your mouse will make your editor behave as if it had swipe turned on, which by the way, you can toggle with the letter T. You can actually control all of these 4 square buttons here with the R, T, F, and G keys, almost like an actual square on your keyboard if you look at it. Selecting objects and hitting R will bring up the rotate setting. Pressing F is going to turn free move on, which as the name says, allows you to freely move objects without using steps or grids. And to freely move objects but lock them to the editor's grid once you release the mouse, all you have to do is press G, which turns snap to grid on. As in pretty much any other program, Ctrl Z is the keybind to undo stuff, and Ctrl Shift Z redoes things in case you accidentally undo or delete something. Finally, you can press enter to playtest your level. In 2.1, you could do Control Enter to playtest the song, but that unfortunately doesn't seem to work anymore. Now you might be thinking, well, I already knew all of these, but it wouldn't make sense for me to get straight to the secret feature without going through the main pillars of shortcuts first. They are essential when it comes to improving your flow in the editor, and they are the ones you're going to use the most. So now it's time to get into the more advanced keybinds. If you are somewhat experienced in creating, you probably already know and apply these, but if you're newer to creating, you probably haven't used these ever. And just like the previous ones, they are extremely useful, but they are part of a different category. They don't really interact with the objects, but more so with the interface of the editor itself, which is why I'm calling them advanced. But don't worry, they're very easy to learn. Now, here's a situation that you've probably been through while making a level. You want to see how your level looks at an exact moment, like when a pulse or an effect happens, or you want to take a screenshot of something specific, but you can never really get the exact spot you want. And that's where this next shortcut comes in. Pressing F1 is going to lock your editor's preview. I can then take my screenshot to share with my friends, and to unlock it, I can simply press F2 and now it's back to normal. You can also use F3 to toggle preview mode on and off. When it's on, it shows you the actual result of your level, exactly how it's going to look in normal mode, but when it's off, it removes colors and trigger stuff. For instance, the opacity value from an alpha trigger is going to be ignored, and the object is going to show regardless. Keep in mind this doesn't apply to objects that have the hide option in the edit group tab turned on. If they're hidden, they will remain hidden unless you toggle the hide invisible setting, which you can do using the F6 shortcut. This is extremely useful when you're making your gameplay separated from your deco, because you can hide and show your layout blocks whenever you want to with just the click of a button. And speaking of hide and show, another very useful keybind is F4. F4 toggles the visibility of the particle object icon, which makes it much easier to tell where your particles are actually going to look like in your level. And if you're doing a very big particle effect, this makes it a lot easier to find it when you need to change something, and you can simply hide it to continue building again. Now, something that can be really annoying when playing levels, and I'm sure you will relate to this, is when you come across a level that has custom assets and the hitboxes aren't accurate at all, which makes the level essentially unfair and just kind of ruins the experience to play. To not make this mistake in your own levels, or if you're confused about hitboxes, you can press F5 to toggle them on and off. You probably know that 2.2 added one of the craziest GD editor features, the warp button, and we all know it's the most flexible way of scaling things. Simply selecting your objects and pressing Ctrl T on your keyboard will bring the warp transform settings, no matter what tab you're in. So instead of having to switch to the edit tab, which you can do with the number 2 button, you will save time by just editing it without having to switch and then clicking the warp button. If you've been watching me build Crystal Odyssey on Twitch, you know it's a huge platformer, and then I kinda really struggled to find things for the longest time, but I don't anymore. And I hated how I always needed to go back and forth to fix triggers or change things at the start of the level, until I accidentally found what might be the craziest keybind the Geometry Dash editor has, especially for big projects. See, since I use a lot of keybinds and I build pretty fast, I sometimes misclick buttons or end up pressing 2 buttons at the same time. And I noticed that when I was pressing the number 2 key to go into the edit tab, I sometimes would mistakenly hold Control for longer than I had to, and the command would actually end up being Control 2. And whenever that happened, a weird message would appear on my screen. Position 2 saved. I was pretty confused about it, but it never really bothered me because I thought it just happened randomly and it was just a new 2.2 thing. It was only after a while that I realized it happened consistently every time I pressed Control 2. I was still confused since I had no idea what that keybind did and what position 2 saved meant. Curious and really wanting to figure that out, I looked through all of the keybinds in the editor's menu when I came across a new shortcut that I had never seen before. And little did I know that keybind would entirely change how I build from then on. Not because it was a crazy change to my building style, but rather because it would fix so much of the issues I had with my flow when creating. Save and load editor positions. If you go anywhere in the editor and press Control 1, it'll say position 1 saved, and now is where we get into the crazy part. If you press Alt 1, no matter where you are in the editor, your screen will instantly go back to the position you saved previously. And you can probably see where I'm going with this. The craziest part of this is that you can do this with 10 different positions by simply using a different number. Control 2 saves the editor position on slot 2, and doing Alt 2 will load that position on slot 2. This single keybind allows you to go anywhere you want in your level instantly without having to look for stuff or to drag your mouse around until you get there. And if you're thinking, well, I still have to memorize them, so this isn't really that crazy, you don't. You can set your first position to an empty area and write down text that tells you where each position takes you according to what you set up. Save that with Control 1, for instance, and if you want to go to a certain place in the editor, you can then press Alt 1 to see your position list, then press Alt and whatever number you want to go to. And if you still don't believe this can save you hours in the long run, just watch me do the same process with and without using editor positions. As you can see, without loading positions, after I'm done with the triggers, I then playtest to see if the movement looks as I want, but I want it to be a bit slower and more subtle, so I gotta go all the way back to where I set the loop, if I can even find it, then edit the properties to fit the movement that I want, and then playtest again, then come back and change the values again. And that extremely simple task took that long. I just changed a simple move loop. And well, that isn't that long, but think about it. What if you have to adjust, let's say, 15 other things in your level? That alone is this much worth of just going back and forth, not even building. And if you're a creator, you know that you definitely need to change more than just 15 things while you're building, especially if it's a level this big. With the time you're just going back and forth, you could be building a new structure or spending your energy on executing new cool ideas for your level. And on the long run, all of these things I mentioned can save you hours and mental energy if you apply them consistently. No more getting stressed looking for a trigger or not being able to build because you took a 3-day break and now you don't remember what anything does or where anything is. Now, another thing that can really slow you down when creating is the lack of motivation or inspiration. And trust me, I get how it is. But if you want to know how to overcome or at least handle your lack of motivation when building, watch this video here. I'm sure it'll help you get a new perspective on creating. Thank you for watching. See you around.